I'm going to introduce my panelists. Please make them feel welcome. First up, Vittorio Colao, the CEO of Vodafone, a company that is taking a series of radical actions to transform lives and businesses across the world. Vittorio, come. We're going to lay out the chairs as they come. This is all happening in real time. Next, Cindi Leive. She's editor-in-chief of Glamour magazine. She knows how to talk to women and girls from around the world. Please join us. Then we have Sue Desmond-Hellmann, an award-winning scientist and now the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She has strong, impactful stories to tell about how we can drive change through data and science. And finally, we've got Jimmy Wales, who's the founder of Wikipedia, founder of the Wikipedia community, which took on the task of translating the goals into 193 languages. And just a small note for you before we get going. I know that you saw in the program that Dr. Denis Mukwege was going to be on this panel. Sadly, he can't be with us. An unexpected emergency has taken him away, so he will not be joining us for the panel, just in case you're wondering. So I just want to make that clear. So, okay, please take a seat. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for willing to take a seat on the stage with me. First question is to you, Vittorio. Add attention, I like that. You saw the film earlier that we played, the Vice film, which basically took the question, is it the best of times, is it the worst of times? In your view, where are we in the world? What's your sense?
I am completely convinced it's a great time, completely. Because I'm completely convinced that we are at a moment where technology can really bring a lot of solutions. Of course, it has to be deployed well. Of course, we need new forms of cooperation across sectors, especially with entrepreneurs, especially with smaller local entities. But it's a moment where, if you think about it, in 3-4 years, you will have 6 billion people with, as Her Majesty said, with a mobile device in their hands. You will have a lot of content, good educational, health, agricultural content available instantaneously to everybody, if we get it right. Now, it's up to us to get it right. But the potential is immense. And we as Vodafone, 3-4 years ago, we realized for the first time, I said something this morning, we said, in the end, we have pipes, and we push stuff through pipes. And what's the best thing that you can put through a pipe is clean water, is pure water, is giving as much water as you can to everybody, because water is life. What is the best thing that I can push through my pipes, with all due respect to Netflix, Google, and whatever? It's education. It's educational content that I can spread at zero cost, essentially, to as many people as possible. When in the history of mankind have we got this? And I echo another thing that Her Majesty said before. Education is probably not the single bullet, but the closest thing that we have to a single bullet. So technology plus education, and I'm optimistic.
Okay, thank you for that, Vittorio. Sue, to come to you. I mean, Vittorio, optimistic, talking about technology and how it can turbocharge the effort to make this world a better place. You spend your time combing through data, using that pastime, if you will, and putting it side by side with the goals. Where are we on balance? What does the data show?
Well, without any doubt, the data shows progress. We heard that this morning, and it's thrilling when you see what can be accomplished when people pull together to make the world better. The threat, and I have to say, anybody who today is a scientist or an expert, it's like kryptonite when people don't acknowledge what you know, your data, your facts. So the threat today is that expertise, elites, are seen as other, are seen as people to not believe. And so that's a challenge to our entire community of data-driven, metrics-driven folks. And one of the things that we're trying to understand at the Gates Foundation, being such data junkies, you heard my bosses earlier today, you know how much they love data. How do we think about communities, decision makers, and how we put facts in a very humble way in front of them for decision making? I'll quote Bill, I predict a comeback for the truth. You can quote me on that. I predict a comeback for the truth. And that is because truth and metrics bring progress. Real change requires accountability. True accountability requires facts and data. And we've used those data, like we've all heard today, to both celebrate, but to put in front of us where progress needs to be made. Yeah. And that's not just great if you're a scientist or an expert, that's great if you're a community member or if you're a decision maker using those facts to make the world better.
Thank you for that, Sue. Jimmy, I want to get your perspective on that because, you know, hearing Sue talk about data and science and then flipping that on its head and thinking about Wikipedia, which is maybe more a ground-up approach, if you will. I mean, talk to me about how you view using the media landscape communication to advance progress in the specific realm that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, actually, what Vittorio talks about, of course, resonates with me very strongly. People with access to the internet. So just last month, Wikipedia was accessed by 1.4 billion devices. That doesn't mean 1.4 billion people, because probably everybody in this room used at least 2 devices to get on Wikipedia, but still 1.4 billion devices. And we're seeing these accesses growing really rapidly in the developing world and all parts of the world. And this is coming about because there is this amazing community of people. And so one reason Sue is right is that facts will win and facts will come back, is that we see the popularity of Wikipedia, which doesn't fare so well in an era of clickbait, shareable content, all right? People come to Wikipedia because they know it and they say, okay, I want it. And the Wikipedia community is very passionate about quality sources, about those experts, and about taking that knowledge and translating it in many, many languages, but also translating it in a way that's accessible to ordinary people, that you can understand the latest research in, say, cancer, not by going to read the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a bit difficult, right? But in something that is fact-checked and really serious. So, you know, this is a very exciting era because we're getting closer and closer to my dream, which is for every single person on the planet to have free access to the sum of all human knowledge. Like, this is what it's all about. This is what the internet is for. And obviously the impact on all of the global goals is it's fundamental. If people don't have knowledge, they can't implement any of the solutions. So.
Thank you. Feel free to clap.
Come on.
Remember what I said, if you're asleep, I have people around to wake you up. We have ways around here. Cindi, to you, again, hearing what Jimmy is saying in his unique perspective, to hand it over to you, how are you, with Glamour magazine, wrapping your arms around these global goals?
Well, to your original question of, is this the best of times or is it the worst of times? I guess as I've been listening to all these talks today, I've been thinking it's really the better of times. But as the president reminded us before, better is good. So for women, our audience, I'm here with Goal 5, gender equality. I think there's still clearly so far to go. So many of the issues we're talking about here today, economic inequality and child marriage, and here in the US, my own audience has a gender wage gap that they earn on average about 78% of their male peers, and they don't negotiate their wages as much as men do, and they see a resulting salary dip. There are a million problems, but I think that women are more, in this country at least, more awake than ever to many of these inequalities and also the power of their voice. So if you had asked me a year ago, what's the role of communication in this, I would have said, and I still believe this, we're the storytellers. We're going to take these huge issues that, can sometimes seem impenetrable that we're talking about in this room, and we're going to put human faces on them so our own audience can relate. And we do that over and over again, all the time. However, what I would say now, I also consider our responsibility is to be in active conversation with that reader. So are we listening to what she's telling us in response? We recently signed a compact with the UN around gender equity, and it had two parts to it. And the first was that we pledged to tell stories that elevated women's voices and illuminated women's rights around the world, and that felt very natural to me because that's the kind of reporting that we do a lot of anyway, and our audience responds to. And if you go on our website today, there's a lengthy interview with Nikki Haley, Ambassador Nikki Haley, and also a large package on the opioid epidemic and what it means for women and women's health. But the second part of the compact was more surprising to me because the UN asked that we look at our own practices versus about hiring women. And we did. And we found, to my surprise, because here we are, a feminist brand that proudly covers all of these stories that I'm talking to you about, we found that actually the majority of photographers we were hiring, particularly for our fashion stories, were male. The majority of hairstylists, the majority of makeup artists. And, while these careers, are not activist or political careers, so on one level they might seem trivial, these are fields that employ many, many, many women. And so we pledged to improve our rates of hiring female talent, and we have done so. But for me, it was really important that as a communicator, we not just think about this as, something that was about what we project out to the world. We actually look at our own village and whether we were running it properly.
That's fascinating. Thank you for that. Vittorio, to pick up on Cindy's point, and looking inwards and being honest about some of the things you discovered when you did that. There are going to be people here in the audience who are in the private sector, who are in business, and they hear you say that you aligned your business with the goals, and they're like, they're kind of thinking, I'm inclined to do that, but there's surely challenges, they may be thinking. What challenges did you encounter with Vodafone in terms of making this recalibration, if you will?
Well, first of all, I'm very fortunate because, as I said before, I work in telecommunications and in mobile telecommunication particularly, where, which has an enormous potential. So areas of conflict, honestly, not too many. The challenge is to pick the areas where you can really make the difference. So I give you a very practical example because otherwise we can really believe that we can make the difference, as I said before, education, health, equality, gender equality or in general inequality, economic inclusions, financial inclusion. I don't think I can make a huge difference in climate change, for example, because I have diesel, I have India. So the first point for me has been pick the things where A, you can make a difference, and B, your company will follow you. Otherwise, it's a CEO thing for just attending panels and things like that. And we picked the right one. And once we picked the right ones, the second thing was tell my colleagues, be open to talk to the outside world. So some of the best things that we have done, the fistula eradication from Tanzania, the idea was not ours, it was coming from a local health NGO. Education, we work with tiny companies who are very good at doing, let me say, high quality, inexpensive education in rural areas up to the refugee camps. And then we come in with our muscle. But it's always pick the areas where you really make the difference and where your people will recognize it's the core of what we do. Pick a goal, pick a numerical goal, a target. And I'm a strong believer, if you don't take targets, eventually nothing will happen. And then work with whoever in that domain is the most agile, the best, and so on. And we found amazing people who use our, if you want, infrastructure and big shoulders to really drive through. But don't try to do 17 because you will not be able, most companies will not be able to follow all of them and to be impactful in all of them.
But for you in the private sector who are here with us right now, you can choose one. I think there's no excuse not to choose one. There's 17 to choose from.
At least 3, I would say.
You guys can choose one. Sue, how do we mobilize the energy of different sectors, from business to civil society to philanthropists? How do we harness that to accelerate progress for the goals?
Well, I think we've heard so many wonderful stories today, so I'll just pick up on one that we heard earlier today, and that was from MSF on HIV/AIDS, and this community-driven groups that made it just far easier and more practical for patients to be compliant with their antiretroviral therapy. So we know HIV/AIDS has just it's killed more than 35 million people. It's a terrible scourge. And the threat of this aged 15 to 24 population nearly tripling between 1990 and 2030 means so many young people will be at risk. So we need civil society to work together collectively as communities, as we've heard so well today, to drive everything from the absence of stigma. Wearing a t-shirt that says HIV positive, that says a lot. So decreasing stigma, banding together to demand that things that make no sense, showing up one at a time to get your meds. Then we've had enormous positive gains from government, including governments like that of the US who have been so positive in PEPFAR and the like. At the same time as philanthropists who love innovation, we know the world needs an HIV vaccine.
Yeah.
So we're investing in an HIV vaccine because others probably won't. It's the subject of what we call a market failure.
Yeah.
So we'll encourage academicians and companies to invest in long-term what the world needs, which is an HIV vaccine. That's a great example of making sure we don't backslide on today's progress while dreaming of making things much better, but always engaging the community in community needs and driving out the kind of stigma that means that people don't seek the care that's even available today.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. Thank you for that. Cindi, we talked about communication from your specific vantage point and reaching out to women and girls. But how do you engage different sectors, if you will? How do you engage grassroots activists? How do you the general public, philanthropists? How do you use communication to engage with these different slices of the population and again bring them towards the goals?
I mean, for us, I think I assume when I'm editing, whether I'm editing a print story or a video, that my audience may never have heard of the goals, and I don't actually explicitly talk about the goals because that would probably be somewhat boring to them, but instead, and I think this is true really for our audiences all around the world, if you can tell a compelling personal story, it will make them take action. I mean, you mentioned Dennis Mukwege, who was supposed to be on the panel. Years ago, the writer Eve Ensler went to interview him at his hospital in the Congo, and she called me after having been there for a week reporting, and she said, you've got to give me, we had settled on it was going to be like a 500-word piece. She said, you've got to give me 5,000 words because this is an incredible, incredible story. And she went on to write a very compelling story tracing the narratives of some of the women he was treating, and they had all been brutalized by civil war. It was very vividly told, and she wasn't writing about, quote unquote, the issue of women in the Congo. She was writing about these women, Antoinette and Nadine, and how they were being treated by this doctor who she drew so compellingly, and our own audience gave $250,000 to the cause as a result without us having to put out a call for donations. And a young woman actually read the story in a hair salon. She was waiting to get her hair done, and she resolved to go climb all the highest peaks in the world to raise money after reading that story. None of that came out of, I mean, those predated the goals, but none of that came out of talking about, quote unquote, the issue or the goals. It was just a compelling personal story. And I would say the other thing that just works to state the obvious, because we've seen it all day here right now, is video. The number of people that you can reach with a really fantastically vivid viral video is unimaginable for those of us who grew up in the era of print.
Indeed, indeed. Jimmy, earlier President Obama said that the online communities are moving offline. Do you see opportunities here and opportunities that would benefit, again, accelerating progress?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things about my community, about the Wikipedia community, is of course we all just started online typing and writing and looking at sources, but now we have projects all around the world where people are doing partnerships with galleries, libraries, archives, museums, going into universities to help teach the professors how to interact with Wikipedia. And we're, genuinely a community out in the world. And I think too often it's very easy to dismiss, hashtag activism. And there's something to that. I mean, there's a lot of spaces online that are just people screaming at each other. That's not particularly helpful. But there's also this amazing tool for people to actually get together in a more slow, real-time, face-to-face basis. They can find people of common interest in a local area and begin to actually take action. And I think there's a huge opportunity here. And I think every organization that is trying to do something grassroots needs to be very savvy about, okay, how do we get all that energy online and actually get them, out here volunteering, in the local context. And so I think it's massively important.
All right. Well, we are almost out of time, but before I let you go, I'm going to do what they normally do to me on air, which is, you got 30 seconds, wrap. So I'm going to give you each, I'll give you 45 seconds and give you the opportunity to give a closing statement. What is it you want the people in this room to go away thinking about? Vittorio.
I want people in this room to really think how they can create, let me call it, innovation hubs around specific areas where different technologies, different parts of technology can really make the difference, and then harness big businesses, institutions, foundations to really go together and cooperate. My frustration is that very often we duplicate efforts, we subscale efforts, and we don't create a system. And very often it's easier to do it for private businesses if somebody else organizes this, almost like the concept of Wikipedia in this sector. And BMG, other third parties and smaller entities can really harness our powerful insights. So provoke us, pull us in, ask us to do things together, not just individual initiatives.
Thank you. Cindi.
I would say for those in this room who, and this is probably most of you, care so deeply about these issues that you work on and you're so passionate about them, the more you can make it personal, the better. I mean, for our audience, and particularly the youngest ones, those under 30, they don't want to listen to brands. They don't want to listen to organizations. They want to listen to humans with human stories and human emotions. And the more you can tell your own human story, even if it's just, you as an executive, why you care about this issue, why you got your company involved, that makes people listen.
Sue, you're a scientist. I have faith in you. 30 seconds.
So my counsel to this audience is use your power and your privilege. I feel so privileged to have experienced what we all experienced today and to learn what we just learned from others. So I'll pick up on something President Obama said, better. We all underestimate our opportunity to make our communities better. And little things turn into medium-sized things, and medium-sized things turn into big things. So each of us has talents and skills. You don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be a scientist, but you might be a coder or a scientist or a communicator. Use your power and your assets and make things better. Starts at home, starts in your community, and grows and grows. If each of us left and did that, the world would be better.
Thank you. Jimmy, last word.
So in the world of Wikipedia, I'm the least important person. And so for an event like this, where we've had all of these big names, we've got Barack, we've got Bill and Melinda, Justin Trudeau, he's super cool. And, but really, that's a great way to convene an audience like this, but it's really all of you that matter. And so goal 17 is about partnerships. And so, think about how you can work with the Gates Foundation or me or Vittorio, whoever, right? But actually meet each other. I think the best part of the whole thing is going to be the cocktails later. Meet each other and find ways to partner with each other, because you can get so much done that way without bothering with the big shot things.
Vittorio, Cindi, Sue, Jimmy, thank you so much. Please show your appreciation. Thank you. Thank you.